Welcome back, DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast. We have another very special guest on this week. It's Fox Sports analyst Townsend Bell. Townsend, firstly, great to have you on, and it's been 2 months since the IndyCar off-season, so what have you been up to? How have you been spending your time?
Well, I still do the IMSA WeatherTech Championship broadcasting, so we've had the season finale at Michelin Road Atlanta, which is always exciting. And then IMSA starts again in January. But from an IndyCar perspective, it always goes a little quiet after the season's over. But I think, we were all pretty excited to see what would happen with Will Power. Pretty unusual that a talent of his level and with achievements that he's had in his career that he was available, seemingly. And I was curious to see who might step up, and the way it all played out with Colton Herta taking the plunge and moving back to Europe because he raced there as a teenager and going into F2. Equally fascinating for us IndyCar fans that have gotten to appreciate Colton's talent and understand his desire to pursue his Formula One dreams. But that opened up, of course, an opportunity for Will Power. And I'm just going to be fascinated to see how that plays out. And I'm excited for Will just to go into a new team at Andretti for the first time in a very, very long time for Will Power. It's going to be fun to see him, maybe rejuvenated, even though he's well into his 40s now.
Obviously, heading into 2025, you knew that NBC's coverage of the series was gone. So at that point, what were your plans? Were you pushing for a move to join Fox as soon as you knew that was the situation, or were you looking outside of IndyCar for other opportunities?
It's a very niche career, as you can imagine, being a color commentator for IndyCar racing. Like I said, I do IMSA as well. It's a little different than, say, our biggest sport in the U.S., of course, which is NFL football. If you're an NFL football commentator, there's a number of places where your talent and experience might be desired. But if you're in the business of doing IndyCar commentary, and there's one broadcaster for that sport, it's a very unusual professional existence, because when rights change hands, like they had going from NBC to Fox, there's no guarantee. There's also only one option for you if you want to continue doing that job, and that's to work for Fox. I'm fortunate in that I already had a relationship with Fox by way of the Fort Lauderdale International Boat Show, which I produce and lives on Fox Sports. So I knew the people, but again, that's not a guarantee. Fox, like any broadcaster, wants the best team for their needs at that time. And I'm just fortunate that the dots lined up how they did, and very fortunate also that Will Buxton decided to come over and join the team. He's been an absolute breath of fresh air, a lot of fun to work with. He has an undeniable passion for IndyCar racing, and an undeniable passion for absorbing and discovering this new U.S. existence for him. That's a lot of fun to watch, over the shoulder, whether that's seeing new racetracks for the first time, new cultural experiences for him, either by way of locale or food or entertainment or all of the above. He's just been a lot of fun to work with. So again, it's a very nonlinear path in broadcasting, and ultimately, I have very little control over that path. So I will say that Fox has been an absolute blast to work with. I frankly never knew how much fun they were used to having through broadcasting, and it's certainly borne out to be the case.
And you've obviously got the interesting viewpoint that you did all the work for several years with NBC on IndyCar. So what were the big differences you observed this year, kind of working with Fox, what Fox brought compared to what you experienced and what NBC offered?
Well, I don't think anybody would deny that NBC is really known for excellent storytelling. They in fact, one of the first things that happened when I joined the Fox Sports team was how complimentary all of the executives were of the storytelling and the race coverage on NBC. We were really proud of what we achieved. It was I did 13 years with NBC and IndyCar, and I don't know that we started out great, but we got there, and it's a process of incredible, sort of repetition and small incremental improvements through the years. And I think moving over to the Fox world, what I've seen is that there's a bigger emphasis put on, sort of the wow factor elements in terms of graphics. Or if you look at the Indy 500, all of the assets and ammunition, if you will, that Fox has across other sport properties that they brought to the Indy 500 to try to raise the wow factor of the Indy 500. And I'm ultimately in the TV business. That's measured by one very simple binary measurement, which is a rating, and Fox delivered. It was the most watched Indy 500 in a very long time. It was the most watched race of any kind in the U.S. all year, above the Daytona 500, certainly above Formula One races. And so they were proud. We were proud as a commentating team, and I think all of that attention really, really paid off.
And when you look from St. Pete then to Nashville, what were the biggest aspects in which you really saw big progress? And then I guess on the flip side, what are some of the aspects that you still think need to be addressed and you're looking at really improving on looking ahead to 2026?
Well, I think if you look at St. Pete to Nashville, you see a dramatic improvement on a number of things on the Fox broadcast. A lot of which are not necessarily just Fox specific improvements. As a broadcaster, I've learned a lot through the years that not everything is Fox's responsibility, that they rely on, some core infrastructure supply from IndyCar, the sport. There was a tremendous amount of behind the scenes infrastructure, rebuilding, and growth and enhancements in the off season between 24 and 25. A lot of that has to do with timing and scoring. A lot of that has to do with the television truck infrastructure that Fox relies on, that is supplied by IndyCar and a subsidiary to IndyCar called IMSP. And so all of those pieces have to kind of come together. If you just look at it from the standpoint of real estate, you might own the house and all of the wires and cables inside your house, but it's only as functional as the public utilities that plug in, the power, the gas, the water, the internet, all of that infrastructure. And that's sort of how television works. You have sort of the back end underlying infrastructure that's not necessarily supplied by Fox, and then you have all the bells and whistles that Fox puts on top of it. It all has to work start to finish, and I think it's fair to say there were some flies in the ointment there early on, and we had to get all that right. That St. Pete broadcast I'll never forget it, because we had a lot of things that weren't working as I'm accustomed to. And it was a bit of a fire drill, but everybody stayed calm. Everybody stayed professional. We did the best with what we had. We also had a lot of new people that had never done IndyCar from a broadcasting standpoint, but a lot of tremendously experienced people from other sports. So all of that came together in one big dramatic kickoff at St. Pete. And as broadcasters, when we know something's not working, we do our best to bridge the gap and gloss over or just kind of do the best with what we can see or know at the time. And what was remarkable was I expected 100% of the fans to be disappointed after that St. Pete broadcast, but it was like 90% positive compliments and all the bells and whistles, and probably 10% of our hardcore fans that could see that we were struggling with some things. But by the time we got to the end of the year in Nashville, a lot of those underlying infrastructure issues had been solved, and so it was a celebration of a lot of hard work, but it was certainly not perfect to start off.
And obviously, you said there's a lot of new guys to IndyCar coming in when you switched broadcasters. But from the presenting side, you still had Hinch, you still had George, you still had Kevin. And obviously, working with the same amount of people, you still had the same core. But alongside you and Hinch in the booth, you obviously switched from Diff to Will. So when you change the person you're alongside in the booth, does much change for you? Do you have to change your style? Is there intricacies that changes part of the job? Or is it fairly interchangeable, whoever you work with in the booth?
So it's a great question, because we had no idea what to expect. And Fox was great about bringing all of us to the studios here in Los Angeles before the season started. They had already hired us, so it wasn't an audition, but it was one of those awkward moments where the three of us were in a broadcast booth for the first time, and they put a 2024 race, actually several races up, including the Indy 500, like halfway into or three-quarters of the way through the Indy 500. And it was literally like, okay, go. The three of you, you're now commentating as if it's live. And it was really the first time for the three of us to understand what the chemistry was going to be like, the dynamics of how you cadence one to the next, and play-by-play and analysts working together. But I think it was probably a much more unpredictable outcome for the group that hired us, because that was the moment of truth. Like, is this going to work? Is it going to be a disaster? Is Townsend going to have a meltdown because, Will's talking too much? Is James going to be able to do all of his normal, analysis? And I think in the first 3 minutes, everybody was relieved, because we all knew in those first 3 minutes, yeah, this is going to work just fine. And but that's this nuanced world that is sports broadcasting. You just don't know until you get into it. Now, have we tweaked and improved and learned to work better together? Absolutely. But that core foundation, I think, was well established in that rehearsal. And it's based on, we all know Will. Will knows us, but we had never actually done that together until that moment. And it was great validation.
And I know the dynamic that you've had with James ever since he came on board with NBC has always been quite interesting. And, people have enjoyed some of the disagreements that you've had, all in good nature, of course. So just talk a bit about that dynamic. And I guess, is it a conscious thing that you guys almost try and stir up conversation in that way during some of the broadcasts?
It's definitely genuine and authentic. If anything, we are typically asked to tone down some of our conflict or disagreements for the benefit of the listening audience. So we're not just two shouting heads disagreeing over everything. I'll maintain that, as a Canadian, James has he has a built-in resistance to the American. Generally only really flourishes after a few cocktails over dinner, but it's in there. I know it's in there. But no, James is, listen, he is incredibly talented as a broadcaster. He was almost born that way. He naturally has a knack for not only analysis. He could do play-by-play. He's a presenter. He can dance. He could entertain, four cats in a dark alley to great success. He's just a natural-born entertainer. He's also a highly accomplished driver, and he's also highly intelligent. And so I have to be very careful when I decide to debate him on something, because he knows his stuff, and he's not going to be pushed over. But when I feel strongly that he's wrong about something, I know I have to speak up, because I can't help myself either. I naturally have my own ego, my own observations, and usually it'll come down to moments where there's a racing incident on track. A perfect case would have been the Connor Daly, Christian Rasmussen crash at Portland. Actually, there was about 3 different moments in that on track. And if he takes one position and I feel pretty strongly about the other, I'll definitely hold my ground and articulate the points to back up my position. And funny enough, oftentimes race control will see it the same way. It won't be an easy call, or it'll be a non-call because it was inconclusive. So I have a lot of fun debating them, but it's all genuine. It's never fabricated. And I will say that sometimes, if I know I'm wrong, as I lean into a counterpoint, or realize that I might be wrong, I might stick with it for an extra 10 seconds just to get that rise out of my Canadian brother there.
I love that. And another strand to the whole Fox relationship is obviously the investment in Penske Entertainment, therefore IndyCar as well. So I guess that there's two ways you can look at that. That it shows the faith that Fox has in IndyCar and that IndyCar has in Fox. But if you were kind of in the shoes of the series leadership, how would you target with this kind of new relationship, this new investment, helping to grow IndyCar? What are the big kind of maybe low-hanging fruit in terms of helping the series to grow that bit more as it deserves?
Well, I think with Fox, you have a partner that is committed beyond what anybody's ever seen with IndyCar. They're now, as you pointed out, a real investor, a real equity holder, not just in IndyCar, but also Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the whole entity. That's never happened before, certainly in the history of IndyCar racing. And so I think for IndyCar, it's an unprecedented opportunity to know that the network has the series' best interests at heart, full stop, because everything that they do now as an equity holder is about growing the sport. Like any investment, you want to buy for $1 and sell at $4. Well, to get that 1-to-4 ratio to happen in IndyCar, like any sport, the 4 or 5 times multiple return on investment is going to come through television. And so I think it's a beautiful way to align both parties to realize that, if Formula One sold for $1 billion and now it's worth $10 billion, how has that happened? If the NFL used to be worth $1 billion and is now worth $10 billion, how has that happened? And television is the lion's share of the path. So I think both sides will obviously be well aligned to grow TV. You have to grow that audience. And then the question is that you just asked, well, where's the low-hanging fruit? Unfortunately, I don't think there's lots of low-hanging fruit that generates a big return on TV, right? Otherwise, it would have happened a long time ago, whether it was NBC or Fox. So I think you have to look at history to know, or at least ask yourself, what happened in the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, early 90s that led to IndyCar's big television audience? Why were those numbers so big in that era? And if you look at the racing in that era, it was not particularly close. Oftentimes, third place in the Indy 500 would be a lap down. Fifth place might be 2 laps down. It was not close wheel-to-wheel racing necessarily. We have incredible close wheel-to-wheel racing right now, which is really exciting. So I think you have to ask yourself whether you're the entity now, the partnership. Okay, what is it that we had then that we don't have now? And therein lies, it's low-hanging fruit, but it's complicated to address. And to me, it is the performance of the car. The trajectory of performance of the car was a very consistent escalation year over year. And to me, that delivers the wow factor. That's the reason people wanted to go see it. It was crazy powerful in its day, in each era, from a power to weight perspective. And the wow factor was incredibly high that you had to go see it. And I think that analysis it's complicated. It's not necessarily low-hanging fruit, but history has proven it's a formula that brings people and draws them in.
And we're talking about ways of growing the series, and we know NASCAR did it about a decade ago with the playoffs to try and compete against the NFL. Now, it's obviously very topical and something which is coming up more in IndyCar discussions, but is a playoff format, you think, something IndyCar should ever explore to try and grow an audience, or do you think it almost sacrifices too much of its sporting integrity to do so?
Well, it's an excellent question, exactly the way you framed it up, Dan, because again, you're looking to grow your television audience, and NASCAR is fighting with the exact same thing as recently as this weekend, where not just in the Cup Series, but in the Truck Series and in the Xfinity Series, you've had you've had standout drivers that some won the championship. Like look at Corey Heim in the NASCAR Truck Series. He won 10 or 11 races this season, unprecedented domination in the NASCAR Truck Series. But you go down to Phoenix and they have a green-white checker to finish the race, and Corey Heim's restarting like 10th, and totally could have lost the championship despite being the most dominant driver. Xfinity Series, same thing. Connor Zilic, dominant driver all year, won a bunch of races, has clearly been the best, not the champion. Denny Hamlin dominated on Sunday, gets to a green-white checker at the end, doesn't win the championship. Kyle Larson, I believe, never led a lap, is the NASCAR Cup Series champion. The diehard fans don't like that. They criticize that. They think it's fabricated for TV. But I am not a diehard NASCAR fan in that I don't watch all the races, by and large because I'm busy doing IndyCar and IMSA during a lot of the weekends. But there I was on Sunday with my wife watching the NASCAR Cup Championship because we wanted to see who was going to be the champion. And we were heartbroken for Denny Hamlin because he didn't win. Heartbroken. But we had an emotional reaction to a NASCAR race as non-hardcore fans. So that's the problem. Is that better for growing the sport because you had two non-hardcore fans with an emotional reaction to a broadcast? Is that a way to draw in more fans? The answer is I don't know. I don't know if that's better or not. But I do know that it would be very disruptive to switch IndyCar to that situation. But what it would address is Alex Palou winning the championship, 2 races early. This year it might be 5 races early. Who knows? And so I don't think that's good either for finishing things off. Therein lies the rub. It's a complicated scenario. Nobody has the answer yet. And NASCAR has been experimenting. I don't know what IndyCar is going to do. But I'm open to it.
And as we get into kind of our final few questions, just kind of switching tack back to your career, I know you'd actually dabbled in some of the TV work quite early on while you were still racing, but once you'd kind of finished up almost that full-time driving career, how did it first come around that you wanted to do the broadcasting? Why was it something that you kind of wanted to take up and have really taken to since, obviously?
So I have a pretty unique story, guys, on my broadcasting transition in that I never wanted to do it in the first place. And I said no, if you could believe that. When I say that now, it sounds absurd, given how much I enjoy sports broadcasting and love the team that I work with and really enjoy the job. But way back when, I was living in England. And I was living in Oxford, and I drove for Christian Horner and Arden in F3000, which is now F2, International F3000. And because I had come from IndyCar, much like Colton Herta coming from IndyCar to F2, I did the same thing back in 2003. And I had a call from a legend in British motorsports broadcasting, Andrew Marriott, if you know who that is, certainly know the name. And Andrew called and said, "Hey, I'm involved in the Sky Sports broadcast for the Indy 500, and we'd love to have you come in and be an analyst for the broadcast." And I said, "Well, I'm not really interested in doing it, but thanks very much for the call." And shortly thereafter, my father-in-law called my wife, and my wife sat me down and said, "I think you really ought to consider doing this." And so they convinced me to take that first job, and I went to a studio in London at Sky Sports and called the Indy 500 as my first broadcast, reluctantly. And only a couple years ago did I realize somebody had sent me a YouTube link to that broadcast where I looked totally despondent and reluctant on camera to even be sitting there having to do this broadcasting job. It's hilarious. Looked like somebody had just given me a glass of raw lemon juice. And lo and behold, the pit reporter for that very first Indy 500 broadcast in Indianapolis on location for Sky Sports was Lee Diffie. And I had no recollection of that for 18 years until somebody sent that YouTube link. And so my very first broadcast, ironically, was in England for the Indy 500 with Lee Diffie, my first sports broadcasting job. So highly unusual beginning, and it should have never happened because I was too narrow-minded as a racer to say no, I don't want to do it. Luckily, my wife and my father-in-law saved me from that horrible mistake.
That's an amazing story. I actually just wanted to pick up on what you mentioned about the parallels to what you did and what Colton's obviously doing. So I guess the question there is that kind of taking of a risk, almost moving away from what's familiar, is that something we should really be crediting Herta for?
Absolutely. It's a very gutsy move. Listen, I know how hard doing that is. When I did it, there was no simulator, no learning the racetracks on the sim. I'd show up at, say Monaco, and I'd get 1 30-minute practice, and the next session was qualifying. And the tires came in on lap 2, and I was, I was behind the 8 ball at every single track. Every time I'd go to Silverstone or Hungary or Hockenheim, all of the European F1 circuits, you just lacked for track experience. And it's not just track experience, it's knowing the tire, the track, the format. I mean, you go to, pick a longer circuit. We didn't do Spa that year because of the tobacco restrictions, but let's say Silverstone. Let's say that, I don't know what it is in miles, probably 3.5 mile circuit. You might only get 6 laps in practice, 5 laps in practice, and there's a red flag, and then you have to deliver. So it was really hard. It's hard to do it in the first year. I'm guessing if I was Colton or advising him, I'd say, hey, expect that this is going to take you 2 or 3 years. And maybe Bottas and Perez, if they're on multi-year contracts, it works out perfectly for Colton. He can get a ton of laps, a ton of reps. And I mean, there's no doubt Colton can do it. He's proven to us on the IndyCar side that he is a rare talent on the road and street circuits. And I know he can do it. He just needs to have the breathing room to be allowed to make some mistakes and learn. But I'm excited to watch. Full credit to him for taking the risk. He's going to have a lot of fun too.
And just some more fun questions just to end us off. I've actually asked you about this on Twitter before, but I think for the benefit of the listeners as well, we're starting to get these subtle highlights in your commentary, Kirkwood, turn 2, whatever it is. So how do these things come around? And then more importantly, how do you do it once and go, yes, I'm going to stick with this?
It's funny you pick up on those. I have no idea. I often watch. I don't often watch previous broadcasts from previous years. I do watch the previous year's broadcast as preparation for that year's broadcast. And it's fun for me to watch because I don't have a great memory for those details, like, where and how and why Kirkwood, evolved. But when I watch it back, I laugh as if I'm a spectator. I'm not Townsend watching Townsend or listening to Townsend. So it's kind of fun for me to discover some of those little nuances in prior broadcast. I don't know. What was it was Kirkwood? What was the other one you meant? Oh, turn 2.
Turn 2.
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you that turn 2, if you look at the cadence of the last lap at the Indy 500, right? My job is to finish my analysis by the time the leader's coming off turn 2. If nothing else crazy is happening on the track for the play-by-play person, I know it's my job to lay out as that leader comes off of turn 2 so that Will Buxton can bring it home.
Oh.
There's not enough time for me to make any more analytical insight once the leader comes off of turn 2. So I like to have turn 1, the short shoot, and turn 2 to finish my analysis of what could happen, what I'm seeing, so that I can hand it over. That means James has got to handle the front straightaway going to turn 1. And so that final send-off, Joseph Newgarden still leads as they come off of turn 2. It's sort of it's my natural enthusiasm for the greatest race in the world. It is also a signal that I am signing off for that moment of the race, to hand it over to play-by-play. And it would be fair to say that I have hockey sticked. I have amplified my enthusiasm just because Why not? It's the greatest race in the world. We're having a blast. Hopefully, all the fans are loving it along with us. And yeah, I've just amplified it through the years.
Fits the occasion. It's brilliant. And
Yeah.
just to finish off, we like doing with anyone who has driven an IndyCar that we have on the show to get 2 song recommendations for our IndyCar driver playlist. So 2 songs. What 2 songs would you like us to add to the playlist?
I would say from an IndyCar perspective, we sometimes play some hype songs in the booth before we go on air to kind of get in the rhythm of things. And at Indianapolis specifically, I know this year I requested a band kind of a metal band called Danzig, and the song "Mother." And it's kind of an aggressive. It kind of gets us psyched up for that.
Cool.
And then another one that we have played in the booth. This was with our now retired, well, semi-retired statistician, Russ Thompson, who's from Nashville, Tennessee. There's another one called Dixieland Delight that I think it's Alabama sings. I can't remember who the band is, but Dixieland Delight is a good old fashioned kind of country song. That we played in honor of Russ because we knew that he would love a little southern charm up there. So those are 2 that I'll throw out that maybe you haven't heard of.
Nice, brilliant. Yeah, I haven't heard of them, so that's a good addition.
All right.
Very long playlist. Anyway, Townsend, that's all we've got for you. Appreciate your time. We hope you enjoy the remaining 4 months of your season. I'm sure will go by very quickly, and we'll be hearing you broadcasting at St. Petersburg sooner than we imagine.
How do we contribute, guys, to Dive Bomb? Do you have a GoFundMe?
Just read our articles, listen to the podcast.
Okay. Well, let's start you should start one just to get you guys to your first Indy 500 next year.
Let's do that.
I'll throw in the first $100.
Let's do it. That would be awesome.
Let's do
Thank
it.
you very much.
Okay, guys.